It's been 100 years since the first powered flight. We walked on the moon.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Revolutionized travel and warfare. The story of flight is so fresh.
We had liftoff.
Every object is a witness to history. At one of the busiest museums in the world, they aim to keep that history alive.
We're contributing to the history and contributing to the future as well.
For those who collect,
Looks like I have an overcoat from the Royal Air Force here.
Go, go, go.
transport,
It's the widest thing I've ever moved.
and preserve its thousands of treasures.
We have very little time to do a great deal of things.
Keeping cool under pressure is a job requirement.
What was that? It's got real easy all of a sudden.
My name is Samantha Snell. I'm a collections project specialist here at the National Air and Space Museum.
Samantha Snell may not have a fancy title, but she has a big job. She's a guardian of our nation's treasures, helping to oversee 70,000 objects and counting.
Everything that we have in the Air and Space Museum has some kind of story. We're here as caretakers on a daily basis for these artifacts, but we need to preserve them and do our best for their longevity so that the American people can come and enjoy it.
Today, Sam's at the Paul E. Garber storage facility in Suitland, Maryland. She and a team of specialists are loading up a Vietnam-era F-100 fighter jet. It's scheduled to be out on display in 3 months' time.
That's got to come up about 4 feet. John, come up.
Crew Chief John Schatz and company have taken the former fighter jet out of storage and broken it down into 3 segments for transport.
All right, lock it up there. I think we're good.
First up, the 9,000-pound fuselage. It's the core of an aircraft that, in its day, packed an unprecedented wallop. The F-100 Super Sabre was the first supersonic fighter. Other aircraft had exceeded the speed of sound on a dive, but only the F-100 had the muscle to do it in level flight. The height of their service was during the Vietnam War. In 1969, hundreds of F-100s were operating from South Vietnam bases. That's where John Schatz first worked with them.
Spent 20 years in the Air Force. 6.5 of that, almost 7, was enlisted. Aircraft maintenance on the F-100 predominantly.
Back off just a little bit. I need to square you up.
We're very fortunate in that John Schatz, the lead restoration technician on it,
All right, come on down.
was crew chief on F-100s. So there is nobody on this planet that knows more about an F-100 than John. So that's perfect.
This plane has seen it all. During the Vietnam War, it spent 3 years at Ben Hoa, a major U.S. airbase 20 miles outside Saigon, and the first target of North Vietnam's 1968 Tet Offensive. These high-performance fighters earned their stripes in battle, but also required a lot of care between missions.
I don't know, it was kind of a love affair with the airplane, although it can be doggy with some of the maintenance that you do on it.
The F-100's glory days may be over, but it hasn't been forgotten. It's headed for a new arena, and one with a sizable fan base. Each year, some 7 million people visit the iconic National Air and Space Museum in downtown Washington.
How did that one get up?
And the newest member of the aviation family, the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center in suburban Virginia. Today's destination for the oversized artifact is the Udvar-Hazy Center's state-of-the-art restoration facility, 40 miles away. And the man whose job it is to get it there safely, museum specialist Anthony Wallace.
I was always interested in aviation since I was a child.
Stand on it. You gotta watch this truck.
When I was in college, I conducted an internship down at the Air and Space Museum downtown in the curatorial department, but came out here to Garber one day to work and knew that this is where I wanted to work.
Anthony's been planning the trip for weeks. He has to. He's not simply hauling a heavy load. He's transporting a piece of history.
We are using the drop center, which is this guy right here, which helps us with taller loads like the one we have on the truck right now.
We need to go left. Go left.
Stand by.
Everything that comes to us, once it crosses through our threshold, it is no longer a working piece of equipment. It is an artifact. And once it comes through our doors, we are not going to be treating it like you can still take it out for a ride.
Anthony has to contend with the 200,000 cars that clog the Capitol Beltway each day.
I'm sorry, you ain't getting my airplane.
One of my main concerns always when we stop around here is other people on the road.
It's a good job.
I know what I'm going to do and what I want to do. I don't know what they want to do or what they're going to do.
Got flashers on, slowing down. Got it.
We're good.
Udvar Hazi's restoration facility will be the crew's home for the next 2 months while they reassemble the F-100. The glossy shop is a far cry from the early days of the museum. It stands as a testament to the vision and tenacity of the museum's first curator, Paul Garber.
Paul Garber created the Air and Space Museum, plain and simple. He loved airplanes and aviation, and he also realized that this brand new technology was going to be extremely important, but no one was attempting to preserve it.
Soon after World War II, Garber began collecting at a feverish pace. He had the vision and he had the will. What he didn't have was the money. He managed to secure 21 acres of land in Silver Hill, Maryland. He picked up the buildings from military surplus. He got local concrete trucks to pour the building pads with their job site leftovers.
He was a scrounger. He called in favors, and I will guarantee you, all the really, really important stuff he got.
Among Garber's prizes, the original Wright Brothers 1903 Flyer, Charles Lindbergh's record-breaking Spirit of St. Louis, and the B-29 Super Fortress bomber Enola Gay, the first aircraft to drop an atomic bomb. For these icons of history, the first stop on the road to permanent celebrity was the mysterious cluster of pastel buildings in Suitland, Maryland. Al Bachmeyer was a local motorhead when Paul Garber hired him in 1971.
I was hired as a welder, but I worked for the collections department here at the time. This was a Cardex system. I decided that collections is probably where I wanted to be.
Al worked with Garber for 40 years, documenting and storing artifacts.
He was a hardcore type collector. He didn't turn anything down because he knew that he may not get another chance for it, that if it was offered to him, he'd find a place to put it.
But in those early days, little was known about artifact storage and conservation. In the meantime, the collection continued to grow. Now, over 60 years later, 40,000 objects are still at the Paul E. Garber facility, and the retrofitted surplus buildings are bursting at the seams.
The Garber facility is very challenging to have proper artifact storage. I mean, when Paul Garber got the land for the Garber facility, he was already collecting. So many things had to live outside for a long time under tarps and whatever else, whatever he could do. But at least he had the artifacts, at least they were being collected. We've known for years that we need to get out of the Garber facility because the buildings have outlived their lives. It is time. We are past our time. We have got to get out.
Today, the Air and Space Museum's 3 locations house over 70,000 objects. And with the Garber and downtown buildings packed, it's up to the Hazy Center's 3 enormous hangars to help make the growing collection available to the public.
All the artifacts we were never able to display downtown because of their size, we're able to display here. And we can store the artifacts properly out here as well.
The Udvar Hazy Center has over 58,000 square feet dedicated to storage. The team's master plan must account for a wide range of special needs objects. Everything requires proper handling. Hardware has to be up and ready, and some tough decisions have to be made about what goes first. For some objects still at Garber, the trip to Udvar Hazy can't come soon enough.
I took a look at where the artifacts are currently stored and which are the artifacts that are most threatened and in the worst levels of deterioration today. And I looked at those and determined that these are the ones that need to come out first. So they're in the first section of the new storage area. And then I just went from there, and there's a lot of logistics that go into preparing these things to come out.
One of Udvar Hazy's hidden gems is its pristine spacesuit vault. But getting the suits to their new digs required some creative problem solving.
When we started the planning for bringing the small artifacts out to the Hazy Center for storage, the biggest collection that we started working with really was the spacesuit collection.
We have a collection of about 280 spacesuits. The suits had been stored at Garber initially under very crowded conditions.
Transporting 280 spacesuits out the door and over to Udvar Hazy posed a rather unusual challenge.
Well, we wanted to have them on trays, but going on trays, how do you transport them? Do you strap them down? If you strap them down too tightly, you're going to damage the suits.
So the move team came up with an unusual solution: coffin boxes.
A coffin is far bigger than a human, so you could get a suit with very large shoulders into a coffin box.
And they were absolutely perfect for moving spacesuits because some of the spacesuits are fairly heavy. So this was a way to move them around safely, support them, keep them on their handling trays, and then put it directly into storage.
Thousands of objects later, the move team is still at it.
The Garber Move team are my boots on the ground every day. I'm in contact with them on a daily basis, usually multiple times a day.
These are gloves from the Royal Air Force. So these will go into our rubber spacesuit storage.
But packing is only part of the job. This team is trained to spot damage and decay and take steps to protect the priceless artifacts.
I would lean towards at least putting tissue down.
These gloves have a rubber material on the lining, and that rubber off-gasses various chemicals. So it's best if those materials are kept together in storage.
But sometimes, even under optimal storage conditions, things can go wrong.
The problem with spacesuits is that they're made of complex materials that were not created to last for a very long period of time.
I'm going to step off the limb now. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
When Neil Armstrong walked on the moon in 1969, he wore custom-made gloves featuring stainless steel fabric and blue silicone fingertips. When the gear was put on display to commemorate Armstrong's life, one glove developed mysterious spots on the cuff.
There seemed to be spots where something had been painted on. The interesting thing is that in the case of Neil Armstrong's gloves, it's only on the right glove.
So this is what I think the clean weave looks like.
Okay, so
What we're working on right now is trying to determine what was applied, who applied it, and when it happened. And this is part of documenting the history of the suit.
Today, Kathy is meeting with conservator Lisa Young and Bill Arey, a rep from the suit's manufacturer, to look for an answer.
So today we're looking at the coatings on the surface of the glove. I mean, it is whiter in that area, Like you can see like even around that abrasion, it's like it almost flowed away from the tear. The white material is called beta cloth. And we're using a new piece of equipment that we actually got in the lab, a 3D microscope.
Is that the
Yeah, this
the
is the
Teflon?
tear.
I mean,
right
that's
here.
just got to be the Teflon.
Or this is the edge of the coating right there.
So it's going.
This way.
Now what we're thinking is that the spot repairs were done to freeze snags that had occurred in the cuff. And what we think we see, we're not sure, is lunar dust that has been caught underneath.
This is where I'm seeing like the swipes of the moon dust underneath that got on the fibers.
That would tell me that this coating was added after post-mission. Not anticipating it would have come right to the Smithsonian and figure out which way the green's.
Lunar dust is very sticky, very sharp, very aggressive. It will attack materials that we just never even thought about.
You see the woven fibers crisscrossing each other in there, which is really pretty cool.
As it turns out, the impacted materials were metal fibers in the spacesuits, which acted as magnets for the iron-based lunar dust.
So we discovered a new history that we didn't even know about.
But it looks very angular and glass. I mean, it doesn't look like normal dust to me.
And these are things that might seem very small, but are very important to missions to the moon, to Mars. So we're contributing to the history and contributing to the future as well, which is really exciting.
Back at Garber, John and Anthony have been waiting a week for a break in the weather to move the next part of the F-100.
It's about 10:15 at night. So each stack is strapped itself. This is just the excess tie-off, because this is the actual. So this one goes up over into the other side. I got 2 of those. And then I've got 2 coming from the other side to pull the wing back that way. Okay. What we're doing is we're getting ready to move this wing for the F-100 Super Sabre.
Anthony has the wings strapped down tight, but the major point of contact to the truck is a pair of 32-year-old tires. If there's a blowout, the strap securing the wing will loosen up.
This goes up and around and takes it straight back to the other side. Yeah, 180.
Overkill is good.
Because of the overall size of the wing, we're actually going to need to move it at night. Advantage of a night move is there's a lot less traffic. But the downside is that you really can't see as well as you can during the day. The weight on the wing is only about 7,000 pounds. But we get into size issues. So 12.8 high, 19.8 wide. This is just a shade under 20 feet wide as we have it rigged on the truck right now. So I've got glow sticks on each one, so we'll crack them before we leave. It's the widest thing I've ever moved. Little nervous, but exciting at the same time.
What I'm looking for is you're on the right. I need you to watch any emerging traffic from my side.
Roger that.
Ideally, what we would want to do is minimal personnel and equipment as possible to keep lines of communication clear and make sure everyone has their specific duty.
Swings around, he can open up the exit gate.
So what we're going to have set up is we're going to have our tractor in the middle.
Anthony and I can only see one at a time. We have to go back and forth with that mirror.
And then we're going to have one of our escort vehicles out in the front and 2 in the back. One on the left and one on the right. That's what's required by our permits. We're going to have a Maryland State Trooper escort us to the Woodrow Wilson Bridge.
Oh, okay. The Maryland Trooper did a walk around in the vehicle. He's now calling in all our information, the permit, and my driver's license to verify everything's legit and ready to go. When his overhead lights turn on, that means that the check came back and we're fine and we're going to go.
This is great. This is great. Pretty cool, huh? Oh, great.
Hey, all the way to the food lane.
Come on over.
You're clear of the lanes.
We are just east of the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. We're still in Maryland. This is where we switch our escort from Maryland to Virginia.
Everything's going as advertised. We'll let nothing happen to the taxpayers' artifact.
Crossing the Potomac River means crossing state lines, and a midstream handoff from the Maryland Trooper escort to his Virginia counterparts.
Genius W has 3 escorts, so will come with us all the way to the museum. So far, we've only gone about 7 miles. We've got about 32 to go, and then we'll get to the museum. It should be about a 35, 40-minute drive from this point.
Go, go, go.
Okay, Carl, let them control the traffic, all right?
They're blocking.
Escort vehicle is twofold. One, it's to keep people away from my truck and my load.
Yep, merging traffic.
But it's also to assist me with what I need to do.
Clear left.
Thank you all.
They can spot things for me that I can't see.
To the right.
If I need to move over, they can go out ahead and get me the lane that I need before I actually physically start moving over.
Everything looks good, Blue. Everything looks good.
So they're a way to keep traffic away from me and also to help me move around as I need it.
You are good. Lots of room, Blue. That's a negative. Everything looks good, Blue. Right side's good.
At the entrance to Hazy, the escort departs, and the team heads for the hangar.
Actually, it was a lot easier having the state trooper than not. So that ended up being a very big help. I've never had that before. I kind of wish I had that from now on. So, and they were a great group of guys.
It's 2 in the morning when Hazy's hangar door finally closes. Anthony posted a personal best tonight, but the job's not over yet. The National Air and Space Museum's 22 curators keep the Garber team busy managing the flow of newly acquired objects.
Everything that comes in the collection gets cataloged, and everything gets a catalog number, gets photographed. Curators are responsible for choosing what comes into the collection, and we're responsible to take care of it after that.
But sometimes curators face a familiar dilemma. They've got too many of one thing and need to do a bit of housekeeping. Museum specialist Jen Lavasser has come to Garber to make some tough decisions about her collection. She specializes in the everyday personal items used by astronauts.
One of the things that's interesting about my job is that the items in my collection are the things that astronauts use that are very much like the things we use here on Earth.
We've got our hot dogs. They seem to still be vacuum sealed, but I wouldn't want to try.
Essentially, astronaut diets consisted of about 2,500 calories, sometimes more, based on the level of activity the astronaut would need to do that day. Just because the food was available did not always mean they ate it.
All of our drinks.
These items don't have nearly as many in our collection, and that's when we need to determine just the right number of things that make sense for us to maintain.
You can actually tell with some of the coffee that this one does not have any cream in it, but that one does have cream.
Some of the things we consider are how likely it is something might go on display.
Because what an astronaut could actually do with this is they could squirt hot water into this, in this case, spaghetti.
If we want to have some available for loan to other museums, but also if there were any reason that someone might want to come and study the item. I think this ongoing fascination with astronauts in particular is that they're these representatives who've had this experience. They represent all of humanity in these exploration projects.
Everything that's on the table should have a condition survey that they've already done.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Earthbound humans take a lot for granted. In space, daily duties can turn into the stuff of nightmares.
What we have here on the table now are what, at least according to the label on the package here, says defecation collection device. This was NASA's solution to how an astronaut would collect their bowel movements. Essentially, its construction is, it's a fairly simple plastic bag. At the top of the bag is a circular portion, and there's an adhesive that goes around the circular portion here. This paper would be peeled off, and the astronaut could literally stick it to their backside. The major problem is the fact that there's no gravity. No gravity or any kind of assistance to keep the fecal matter at the bottom of the bag. It wasn't uncommon for some to escape the bag as well.
If you poop in that, the poop doesn't just go to the bottom, it floats in there.
And so it did sometimes get loose and float around the cabin.
Ooh.
Astronauts were not keen on a lot of these things. It's highly personal, so some of the difficulties that they had during the missions weren't often talked about until years later when astronauts started writing their memoirs and talking about really the nitty-gritty of being in space.
Curators acquire to help interpret the past, but they also want to help keep future astronauts alive and healthy 100 years from now.
We may never really get to know what that sense of weightlessness and awe and wonder at seeing Earth from afar, what that's really about. But they're the ones that are willing to take that incredible risk that I think is always going to exist in this process of space exploration.
Back at the restoration shop, John Schatz and his team have 3 days to reassemble the F-100.
The goal today is to try to install the engine. And before we can do that, I have to make sure that these railing systems are cleared through here and smooth. And I'm going to try to make it so that it's straight enough that we can actually slide it in, because this is going to be an obstruction the way it's set up right now.
Getting all of this stuff out of the way so when the engine goes in, we don't have electrical cables and hydraulic lines snarling.
John's prepared for a few glitches. The F-100's been idle for the past 32 years.
The installation itself is pretty straightforward. That's the little stuff that gets you. Basically, the next step is get the engine over there and lined up with the engine bay. And the dolly that it's on here right now is adjustable. So it contains a certain amount of roll and a certain amount of left and right. So if you're well within the ballpark, then there's no problems with getting it lined up and moving in.
I pick these up.
Yeah? Right. Slightly heavy.
All right, on 19.
5, 6, 7, 8. All right, ramming speed.
This is ramming speed.
The engine is lined up and ready to go. Will's job is to adjust the dolly so it can slide into the fuselage.
How are you looking?
About another inch.
Another inch? Am I going the right way? The other way. Is it working?
Yeah.
Finish.
Well, as you can see, moving up on it, aligning, trying to keep everything out of the way. Unfortunately, in a couple of cases, we had a snag.
Give me a 1/4-inch drive ratchet.
Well, you've got a lot of hoses in there that become stiff as certain things have gotten into position from sitting around all those years.
Got lined up over there, Rob. Bring the aft up. Yeah. Coming up. Okay. I feel I'm just going around in circles. Every time I start putting pressure on it and try to push the engine in there, it skips like a tooth. It's going as hard as you can. I'm putting a lot of pressure, spinning this thing up. And I'm stripping the gear, so to speak. What was that? Just got real easy all of a sudden.
This morning at the Udvar Hazy Center, Sam's team jumps into go mode when their truckload of artifacts reaches the loading dock.
Well, it's 8:55 in the morning. We are offloading our Penske straight truck with textiles from our collection back at the Garber facility. In total, it's probably about 100 items that are going to be coming out.
100 textile items might fit easily on the discount rack at the mall. But here, that number fills up a freight truck. That's because this batch of clothing was designed for a different runway. Jackets, trousers, overcoats, flight suits, dresses, hats, long underwear. It's all here, and it's all been individually packaged and prepped for storage. Exposure to dirt and humidity can harm artifacts, so Sam and the team move quickly. And in the spirit of Paul Garber, they're still improvising. They've resurrected the original coffin boxes they used to move the spacesuits. Many of the items in this shipment fall under the watch of curator Alex Spencer. He's here to check out a few of the uniforms in his collection of 15,000 artifacts.
The material here that you see is a little barrier that they put so that there's not a reaction between the wool and the brass of the insignias to help preserve them and prevent corrosion.
Maintaining a 60-year-old overcoat isn't easy under the best circumstances. The storage facility at Udvar Hazy must protect it for future generations to research and enjoy. For Alex, the mission is critical.
It's hard for an individual, a visitor, to relate to an aircraft sometimes. It's something they don't encounter in their everyday life, of course. So if you can bring in the personal objects, it humanizes the story. This is how they go to war.
The F-100's fuselage is in position and secured. Next step is to place the aft section, but John Schatz doesn't like what he sees.
The afterburner that's on the airplane right now, it's in the full afterburner position or the maximum thrust position.
The afterburner gives the F-100 the thrust needed for quick takeoffs and supersonic flight. To look authentic on display, it should be completely closed down.
We're trying to close this constrictor off, so it's actually, it closes up like a clamshell. All this closes up into a smaller hole. With these cylinders here, we're trying to activate these cylinders to push against these leaves here to actually close off the constrictor.
But the cylinders haven't moved for over 32 years.
Basically, the piston seals have dried out. You can see where they started to move out here. See, like down here, it hasn't moved all that much, so what we've got is a situation where they started to bind.
The dried out seals have locked up the cylinders. John decides to pump nitrogen gas directly into the afterburner to try and free them. It's a long shot at best, and he'll need a special fitting to hook up the gas.
Well, we gotta make pneumatic fitting that'll fit on this end here so that we can use that nitrogen tank to charge up these cylinders here. So we want to close it off there. We don't have a fitting for it, so we're gonna have the machinist make a fitting.
The shop's machinist, Gary Gordon, is equal parts mechanic, inventor, and artist.
Well, we're just trying to get a smaller piece to make this fitting for John.
During restoration, John keeps the artifact's curator in the loop on the team's progress.
During a restoration, it's a give and take. A lot of discussion goes back and forth between the restorer and the curator as what we can and cannot do. And sometimes we make a decision where it's just too expensive, or we can't find the parts, or we can't manufacture the parts.
That's why we got flexible hoses.
That's exactly what I thought.
We curators know a good deal about the aircraft, but when it comes from the technical side, I understand John knows far more about it than I.
So is that a 2 or a 4 burrito job we just did?
I'll settle for 1 today, John.
Okay, you're on. You're easy.
Good. I try to be.
Yeah, we'll go from there.
About 100.
Gary Gordon did the initial fitting, and we applied pressure, and of course, we had a bypass, which gave us back pressure, and nothing was happening.
More?
Well, there goes my burrito.
I can't feel anything on top.
That's the afterburner control valve.
Well, see, there's no air coming out of this. Oh, man.
Yeah, I was counting on this thing being closed.
It's right around the ring here.
How about if we block this one off on here?
Now we're back against the same thing, Gary.
Oh.
It's called another fitting.
Well, it don't matter.
Yeah. So he made another piece that allowed immediate flow.
We'll give it a try again.
Yeah. We applied about 800 psi. Nope. But it was leaking so badly that we had to discontinue it. We might have to try and manually close it, and that's not going to be easy.
While John and his crew wrestle with the F-100, Sam and the Garber move team check the uniforms into their new quarters.
We've already received the barcodes for all the drawers in this one. So
Sam brings Alex Spencer up to speed on the new system.
Go through and start labeling and get ready to accept the next collection.
Right. Okay, good.
1989-0065. So for the next set, I did just order shelves because since we have all these nice handling trays now, we can move them in and out easier.
That does happen where you get a phone call out of the blue from somebody that says they have something and it's something, you know, from World War I or the World War II that you don't have, and you go after those, but you can't plan for those kind of things. As I'm doing my job, I have to kind of keep up with current events and where things are happening and what's going on in the world. It's particularly relating to aviation.
A donation offer from a former Marine Corps officer has caught Alex's eye.
And this is actually the first email that I got from Captain Dwyer concerning the potential of his donation. He included a couple of photographs as well as a short bio of his flying career with the Marine Corps. With this collection of Matt Dwyer's things, he was an Osprey pilot. So an Osprey is a fairly new aircraft. It hasn't been used for that long. We have a prototype example of it in the collection, but we don't have an Osprey itself.
The V-22 Osprey landed on the scene in 2007, designed to get troops and their equipment in and out of combat zones. It has unique rotors that allow it to take off, hover, and land like a helicopter. Then tilt forward like propellers to fly as fast as an airplane. Its innovative technology and involvement in the post-9/11 wars make objects related to it of particular interest to Alex Spencer.
He included his standard pair of desert flying boots. Here he also included his leather shoulder holster. So what we have here is Captain Dwyer's flying helmet.
Everything Matt Dwyer has donated will help Alex tell the Osprey story.
This provides him oxygen. It also has a microphone on the inside so he can do his communications and talk to people. First off, it personalizes the events, and they can tell you what they did and where they were at, what kind of actions were taking place, what it was like to be in combat, what was the sound of combat. Those are always a bonus to have that bring the story of what they're living and doing to life for me personally, but then hopefully it can be translated as well onto our exhibits down on the floor. These are the manuals and checklists. We want to be able to convey that to our visitor. In this pocket, it looks like he included a small memoranda book with notes for flying, organization, places that he was flying in and out of. With what I'm doing now, I can actually plan with my collecting. I know what's out there, I know what's going on, I know these are important events that we're living in this day and age, so why don't we get it now, and then we're not having to scramble at a later date and time.
They'll have to wait for the Osprey, but in the meantime, Captain Dwyer's gear will head to Garber for processing.
I can't hear it. Can you say we're going to come in 2 feet. All right. Coming in. Coming in.
The F-100's stubborn afterburner won't close, but they've got just enough room to slip the aft section over it.
John wants up, front and back.
Coming up, front and back. Stop it. Bring her in again.
Front end up.
Front end coming up.
Hold.
Holding.
Well, we're kind of hoping that the afterburner actuators would work so that we can close the afterburner down to a normal position.
Coming forward.
Coming forward.
Oh, good.
We're hanging up on something.
We're hanging up on something else.
The problem is now, of course, the aircraft will appear with the afterburner in the full power position, the full open position.
Something's holding up. It's hung up on something.
Which, for anybody that's worked on the airplane or has flown the airplane, will recognize that right away.
Oh, yeah. I hate to tell you guys this, but I'm about getting close to bottoming out.
At this point in time, there's not really much we can do about it.
After the F-100 is fully reassembled, the team will add the final touches to its appearance. Traces of an era gone, but not forgotten.
The decision on how an airplane appears is the responsibility of the curator. Now, the curator will work with the restoration staff to make sure that it works, but basically we want the airplane to look as it did truthfully at a certain point in its career. In our case with the F-100, we're very fortunate in that the paint that's on it, when we got it from the Michigan Air Guard in the mid-70s, is the same camouflage paint it had on when it was serving in Vietnam. All we had to do was change a few of the markings to bring it back to where it was when it was flying during the Tet Offensive in 1968.
So what we've done with the airplane is change it to appear as it did at Benoit, specifically in the garb of the 90th Squadron, as designated by, the tail paint, tail numbers, and the paradise on the nose gear door.
Calibrated bar. Come on, there you are.
It's fantastic, but they're like a well-oiled machine. All these guys working together, and they've been doing this for a long time. They know each other's moves. You can do a lot without it, using a lot of words, and everybody's paying attention and being as careful as they can.
Carriage is out, John.
They made it.
The F-100 is on the final leg of its journey to Udvar Hazy. It's a half-mile tow from the restoration lab to the museum hangar. For John and his crew, the job isn't over until it's on the floor and secured.
Well, hopefully this thing on its 40-year-old tires will make it from here to the north entrance where we can park it. That's the plan for the day. There's a feeling of relief wrapped up with the nostalgia, but most of it's just relief. It doesn't look like much sitting out here as one airplane, but all the bits and pieces. And, well, you've seen some of the struggle that we went through getting some of this stuff reassembled. So. I'm relieved. I may go celebrate with a donut and a cup of coffee.
It's been a long ride for the Hun, as it was called. It's logged thousands of miles in service, endured a war on the other side of the world, and all the while setting a new standard for aviation innovation. For now, John Schatz and his team will take a moment to celebrate. Then, they'll get to work on the next assignment.
The group that's here right now, I think it's all one mind. We've got something to present. We care about what we do. Some of it can be extremely sensitive where you think, do I touch this? And that's really what makes it interesting.
You take a look at this stuff and you wonder, geez, how in the world can something that big just get up in the air? What holds it up? How does it work? I got to understand them. I got to work on them. And I had the best life I could ever think of because of it.
It's a collective effort. It's a team effort. It's downtown, it's Garber, it's Hazy, it's every department, working together to make a final product to share with the people of this country and people from all over the world.
Paul Garber lived to see the National Air and Space Museum become one of the most popular in the world. His prophecy that this new and evolving technology would touch each of our lives inspires the millions who visit each year. And for those behind the scenes, dedicated to preserving and caring for these national treasures, Garber's vision still burns bright.